I would suggest it's perhaps a key word that I like to share with my children who are still very young, and that's persistence. I think if you can be persistent in life with everything that you do, that will see you through, and that will see you through failure, which you should expect. But if you're persistent and you believe in yourself, it means that you're going to keep going. There's always highs and lows in life, on a personal level and on a professional level. I think, celebrate your wins.
Welcome to another exciting episode of our Founders and Leaders interview series. Let's talk about a platform that provides automation tools and services to streamline the app development process. Today, we have the privilege of sitting down with a true visionary in the tech world. Meet Keith Neilson, the CEO and founder of AppFactor, and a seasoned technology professional with a remarkable career spanning over 17 years. Keith's journey in the tech industry has been nothing short of extraordinary. So, Keith, can you share your journey of founding 9 startups and how those experiences led to the creation of AppFactor?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Look, my career spanned many different domains and areas of technology, different products, different services, different segments of the IT industry as a whole, from distribution up through to resellers, and obviously, as you mentioned, sort of many startups. My career has been really centered around pre-sales engineering, and fundamentally, that's all about having a technical background, but being able to really gather and sort of empathize with business and technical challenges and translate that into a viable solution. And my career has been built, really establishing teams to deliver that. And through all of these different experiences, really it's paved the way for me to, land on a real opportunity and gap in the market that I've spent many years validating and working through, building a really capable team around me, and learning from all of the different experiences that we've had through that journey of my career, and indeed theirs, right? And coming together as a team to really try and solve a problem that we really feel is sort of rife and needing to transform.
All right. Okay. So, what motivated you to address the issue of technical debt in legacy enterprise applications, through AppFactor?
Yeah, sure. Well, as I've kind of alluded to, there's been a couple of experiences that I've had with a couple of different software companies, one of which back in sort of 2015, 2016 was very focused around app modernization. And, that really paved the way to understand that, the problem is pretty significant. There's really a lack of tooling and technologies out there that try and address legacy, right? I think that the industry is very much focused on developing, supporting new initiatives and projects, right at the cusp of newer technologies as they emerge. But I think one of the challenges that we see in the industry is that there's a degree of neglect, be it intentional or just through the means of us trying to sort of progress with technology, that we leave systems, applications, infrastructure, architectures behind. And traditionally, we do a pretty poor job, I would say, of kind of trying to maintain those in such a way that allows us to apply more contemporary technologies to them. And that's kind of the experience that we had before. Been involved in many global initiatives around migration and indeed modernization, worked through Microsoft and Amazon and Google partnerships. I built those, established those within that time frame. And I think what we've seen is a huge amount of cloud migration that's been really about trying to just sort of make that first wave take place. But now we're at that position where organizations really need to look back and address that technical debt, not just from the cloud perspective of what we've seen lift and shift and trying to optimize those workloads, but actually there's a ton of older systems and software applications that we were unable to move the first time round. So that's kind of like the inkling of what we've seen. Now, since we've established AppFactor and really sort of tried to attack this space, we've just seen a wealth of that, right? Where there's a wave of best practices that have evolved over time that have left software in vulnerable positions. We're seeing end of life software take place, different timelines of technologies that, organizations have kind of failed to address. The cost to maintain them is incredibly high. It's quite kind of crippling. Doesn't really leave them the budget to innovate. And like I say, AppFactor is really a productized solution that is really about trying to simplify and automate those steps for engineering teams to try and tackle these challenges across those sort of four pillars that we see: infrastructure, architecture, code, and dependencies.
All right. So, Keith, can you delve into the functionalities of AppFactor's core components, like the scanner, analyzer, orchestrator, and
Yes.
the overarching SaaS platform, and how they interplay to deliver value to your clients?
Indeed, yeah. Well, look, fundamentally, the challenge around app modernization, first and foremost, is, what applications do I actually have in my environment? Where do they reside? What's the anatomy of those applications? What components and dependencies actually make up these applications? And then obviously diving deeper is what's the makeup of those and the relationships, etc. Now, the first piece of the jigsaw really in the market with this, which is done traditionally today, is to try and analyze and perform discovery against these applications and try and establish where candidates lie and what's the scope of the work that's required to actually move them forward. Now, today, this area of discovery, app discovery, is incredibly manual. It's disjointed. It's very consultative driven. There's a bunch of tools that are used. A lot of sort of first-gen cloud migration tools are used, which doesn't look with an application-centric lens. It's more looking at a lift and shift bias, looking at the server infrastructure. And so the first piece of our platform is what we call discover and assess. And you've touched on a couple of parts of the sort of architecture of the platform there. The first piece is a product that we call the AppFactor Scanner, which is a native binary, really a thin, lightweight agent, if you like, that is responsible for collecting all of the data, the markers, if you like, for app modernization across existing environments, be it cloud or on-premise. So we have one for Linux distributions and we have one for Windows Server versions. And that scanner, it collects all of that data very, very quickly and under a second in parallel, at scale. And it collects things like app dependencies, environment variables, the data, the source code, the libraries, the network configurations and attributes. There's a whole bunch of information that it collects. And once it's collected it dies and removes itself and doesn't leave any remnants behind. So it's really light touch, very fast. Now, in order to distribute those scanners, we have a product which you've talked on called the orchestrator, which allows customers to define the scope of discovery, where they want to run the scanner, and how often they want to run the scan. So it could be down to a minute if they wanted to. It also allows us to define how we want to conduct the discovery. Do we want to start from a single IP address and disseminate out organically to learn the environment, or do we want to start off with a whole, LAN segment, maybe a cloud environment across a few accounts, however you wanted to sort of run that? That's what the orchestrator will do. And it's also designed for sensitive environments. So where we've got, government customers or, highly secure customers or environments, you're able to use the orchestrator to sort of proxy those connections that might not have outbound activity. And then, of course, we have our SaaS platform. And the SaaS platform is the hub, right? That's collecting all of the metadata, the information, and it processes it. And that's deployed actually in the customer's cloud environment. So it's highly secure. We're not actually handling any credentials. We're not storing any of their data outside of their own environment. So it's really designed to be fitting for the enterprise engagements that we see and that we've started working through already. With customers. And then obviously as you work through the product, we have the ability to actually modernize these applications, not just report and, illustrate what the anatomy looks like, and of course then deploy. So that's the kind of architectural makeup of the platform. And like I said, the first piece that it solves is trying to quantify where the technical debt actually exists. We are able to sort of detect things like end of life vulnerabilities across the application dependency stack as well as obviously identify automatically without any manual and sort of consultancy about where there's modernization opportunities and what's the art of the possible. The product's doing all of this for our customers automatically.
Right. Expedite the process of transitioning legacy applications to modern cloud architecture, and what makes it stand out from all other platforms, offering similar services?
Yeah, sure. Well, look, the thing is, you've just touched on one important point to mention is that this isn't a service; it's a product. It's a product that really accelerates the process and steps that are involved today in exactly that, trying to identify, modernize, and deploy existing applications away from the environments that they're stuck in today into newer
Right.
cloud native architectures. So the first piece we briefly talked about, which is discovery, learning an application, establishing what its makeup is, what dependencies it has, what's the nature of the application. That's what the product does first, and that helps prioritize and plan. The next piece is that it actually extracts those data points. We call them artifacts. And what it does is it automatically rebuilds the application with all of the dependencies that we've mentioned into a Docker file that defines what the makeup of the application is. If you wanted it to, it can actually update the underlying framework and runtimes to a newer version if that's applicable. So you can really uplift the application and move it forward, and then it layers the dependencies on top or the attributes on top. And then it will automatically build that into a Docker image and deploy that to any cloud native target. So that could be modernized on-prem, hyper-converged, infrastructure. It could be Google, Amazon, Azure, all of the different container or cloud native services. Where it's really different and where it sort of goes much further than that at this stage, right, because we're still quite young in our journey, is that it's doing this across what we call N-tier applications, so complex multi-host applications. So, there are some command line driven tools that you can use today for what we call single app instances. So, you could go to a server, you could find a single instance of an application, you could use a command line tool to convert that away from virtual infrastructure. And then you'd have to sort of go through your manual process of deploying it. But what about where you've got a whole stack of an application from a database up? You might have application servers and a front end that's actually distributed across multiple hosts. That's what AppFactor is doing. So when it does discovery, it's actually really able to understand the application entropy across multiple hosts, across the whole current infrastructure, and it's physical as well as virtual. What it does is it's able to translate those relationships, the whole stack of an application, into a cloud native form. So it's intelligently identifying all the various different tiers or application patterns that we see, and it will build all of those components into individual container images. And then when it deploys, it generates all of the networking and deployment specification for you that stitches all of that back up. And that's very unique and incredibly powerful. It's really divorcing all of the complexity and time and manual effort that's involved in having to do that today manually. So that's right now one of the big fundamental differences that we have. Of course, as we move forward, the product is performing discovery, analysis, modernization efforts across different pillars that support these applications. So at the moment, we're not handling application code. We capture it as part of the process, but we're not changing or analyzing individual, classes of code. That will come. But right now, we're able to really accelerate the journey to cloud native architectures from physical or virtual based infrastructure within minutes using the process that we've just described. So it's really making a massive impression. It's improving modernization velocity. It's meaning that the engineers that are tasked with performing these efforts are able to do it with ease. In some cases, there's a lot of missing documentation, a lack of time and skill sets and budget that's required to actually do this. And this is where AppFactor is making a huge difference today, in being able to go from existing environments at scale, across the whole portfolio, like I said, be it in cloud or on-prem, and accelerate the path to being able to adopt Kubernetes natively, or being able to move applications to a Fargate or ECS, various different cloud services that customers want to move to. This is where AppFactor is making a significant difference today in accelerating the path to those services.
Right. Okay. So you just mentioned Modernization, which will be launched in November. Now, what unique capabilities will this module bring to your clients?
Yeah, well, we've got some capabilities out already, and we've got some customers using it as sort of early adopters, but formally launched in November indeed. And fundamentally, this is the module that allows us to, take all of the data that we've collected from discovery, that first module that we've mentioned, and extract that and rebuild these app dependencies into cloud native form. And it will also allow us to handle some complex scenarios, perhaps where we've got applications that have things like fixed, hard-coded paths, hard-coded IP addresses, or domain names. There's various different challenges that we see across the way that applications have been previously written, that this particular module in the product is designed to resolve. It becomes a re-architecture studio. So it's about transforming applications based on the target architecture that you want to move to. And that's a key thing, and one thing we've not touched on yet, is that underneath all of this, that supports the discovery and empowers the modernization module that's due to release in November, is machine learning classifications. And that's really about us allowing our users to identify, contextualize, and optimize application architecture. So an example would be that we've scanned a data center that a customer's looking to move away from. They want to move to Azure, as an example. The AppFactor product is able to rapidly scan, learn, and map an entire environment, quantify that data, identify what's end of life and where the vulnerabilities are, so that we can help prioritize and plan which application comes first, second, third, fourth, or what wave of applications do we modernize. And it allows us to create a baseline of that architecture that as it stands today. What type of pattern, what dependencies actually support that application? What database is it? How is it communicating? What's the nature of that communication? These are the kind of answers that architects will have to ask today that our product is actually providing within a couple of minutes. And then obviously it empowers you to optimize the architecture based on those attributes that we've discovered and point towards the platform that you want to move to. So it's smart automation that allows us to accelerate the journey to more optimum cloud architectures. That's really what we're releasing in November for Linux and Windows Server applications and workloads.
All right. So how do you see the market for app transformation evolving in the next few years?
Well, this is a really interesting point. I think we're really at the cusp of seeing modernization come to the fore. I think the reason being is that the last sort of 12 years or so of cloud migration is predominantly being lift and shift. It's been rehosting, perceived to be quick wins of moving a virtual infrastructure into the cloud. What's really happened is that, for a start, that hasn't really addressed a lot of the technical debt. It's more often moved it. And it lacks cloud optimization. There's more mature cloud services, an abstraction that we can take advantage of. So we're seeing a second wave of cloud migration take place, where a lot of the rehosted workloads now need to carry on that journey and move up through containerization, serverless, WebAssembly. There's a bunch of technologies that we can try to take advantage of now that require modernization efforts. And equally, there's all the complex applications that we couldn't move because they needed modernization in the first place. And often they were kind of left behind, right? So I think for us, there's a significant increase of demand that we're starting to see, and that will continue. Gartner research suggests that $515 billion by 2027 for app modernization. So it's a tremendously large, immense market opportunity. More customers are trying to still move out of data centers. They're trying to, capitalize on cloud technologies and refine what they have, and equally move more to it. So, cloud migration's not done. And the point about modernization is that it really is, and it should be a routine, right? It shouldn't be a project. This is an ever increasing, ever going cycle, and legacy really is a continuum. It's applications and supporting infrastructure is always aging. It's always being exposed to change. And so fundamentally, there's a real need to have a productized solution that optimizes that process to monitor, manage, and deliver the outcomes that customers are looking for. So that's kind of really what we're seeing now. I expect that to compound over time. And the product that we're building really supports that journey, right? The sort of future of AppFactor really supports the fact that there's legacy today that we were trying to optimize into more contemporary technologies, and those technologies will be legacy tomorrow. And so it's trying to build, a cohesive platform that supports developer efforts, optimizes and simplifies them, and provides guardrails for them, so that we have more control over technical debt in the future. And of course, part of the product, of course, is being able to cut and deal with that. So that's the kind of vision of the product and the company moving forward.
Right. So what emerging technologies do you think, will be significant impact on the enterprise app space?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of things. Clearly there's evolution around runtime technologies. We're starting to see WASM, which is WebAssembly, I think starting to really pick up and take shape. I think there's still a way to go. But definitely there's a huge interest and value in that technology, and we'll have to monitor how that evolves. But for us, that's a big one. And indeed, it will be interesting to see what happens with the likes of, Kubernetes long term. I think more abstraction is ultimately needed. And so, I think more abstraction, newer technologies, of course, that we haven't perhaps even had the foresight to look at yet. AI is obviously playing a tremendous part, as we know. There's a bit of a buzz around that at the moment, of course. In terms of how that can potentially play a part in both development, development operations, and supporting the life cycle of applications. We've not really seen too much of that yet. So I think there's a huge amount of change as per normal, right? The exponential speed of new technologies coming is part of the challenge with all of this, because it's hard to keep up. But I think for us, some newer emerging technologies that are coming through that kind of change the paradigm of how cloud technologies are used, how we package our applications, how we run them, and how we architect them, I think is we'll see a lot of movement in that space. Like I said, I think WebAssembly is a big player that we'll start to see more of moving forward.
Right. So how does this 3D visualization engine and VR capability in AppFactor aid in better understanding and managing complex applications?
Yes, well, part of on the discovery side, one of the challenges that I kind of alluded to earlier is architects, engineers, anyone that's responsible for looking after an application, including the application owner, they have challenges around really establishing what the anatomy is of an application. And that becomes more complex the longer the application's existed, right? Many different patches, changes, evolution of the environment around an application, perhaps the infrastructure that it's running on, maybe it's moved to the cloud. All of these, other systems that have perhaps been integrated within the application or part of it. Applications and software evolve over time. And so what we see is, technical debt starts to emerge, it compounds over time, it becomes more complex, the intricate relationships between dependencies starts to get more complex. So think of like a ball of spaghetti. And so one of those big questions that we have, and that's been asked of us already at this stage, is how can we simplify and optimize the ability to visualize these dependencies? And so we started to build out some functionality around trying to disrupt that space and trying to find an intuitive way of being able to understand and quantify the makeup of complex infrastructures and applications. And so we built a 3D engine to help us do that. And this is twofold. One is being able to visualize and identify app dependencies at granular level in a really immersive way that it ultimately is quite fun to use, but actually really solves the problem, right? It's one thing to look at lines of code. It's another thing to kind of visualize that in a really powerful way, and it brings it to life. And I think that's really what's needed. The second thing is that we're actually planning to use this 3D engine to help us illustrate and visualize architecturally what we're trying to move to. Okay, so we can kind of preview how the application will look through every iteration of modernization effort that we want to apply. It could be changing the database. It could be trying to decompose a particular component of an application and maybe split that off as a macro or microservice. It could be moving it to a Kubernetes cluster and breaking that up and visualizing this. It's a way of us being able to model how we're evolving and optimizing an application's architecture. So two sides to the fence with this, and an incredibly powerful capability that we've already started to build out in the product. And the reception's been fantastic. We've had a lot of customers and prospective customers and partners actually, really want to use it in anger as we build it out. We've only just started it, but it has a huge scope in itself. It's quite an exciting feature of the product.
Okay, so Keith, can you share any success stories or significant impacts AppFactor has had with commercial clients like Civica?
Yeah, for sure. Well, fundamentally, what we've seen is a huge jump in modernization velocity. Initially we deployed the discovery module first, which also has tremendous value. It's really enabled them to automate a lot of the processes and steps that they would have when customers need to understand and perform discovery, or they want to support a project. So use cases around cloud migration, the product has delivered tremendous value already. In that what it's done is really automate the steps around trying to learn, and quantify what makes up an application and the infrastructure that it's in. So we've seen huge gains in terms of speed and acceleration around that, but also around the actual modernization side. So being able to, take a .NET application as an example that we've delivered on and deploy that running as a containerized solution. No more operating system. We've removed end of life vulnerabilities such as an OS that a customer was actually running on. It's really moved the needle, and it's delivered the outcome that both Civica and the customer are actually looking to achieve in rapid time with minimal effort, and obviously at a cost that's tremendously lower than it would otherwise be. So what we've seen is AppFactor not just deliver the outcome that's required, but actually deliver it in such a time that's allowed more applications to be looked at. It's improving the throughput of the whole initiative. So yeah, speed, cost, outcome is where we've seen tremendous value so far using the product. And I think we're really at that point now where we're starting to see new partnership engagements emerge, new customers are coming on board. The kind of exposure of what we're building and the success that we've had so far has really started to open up and explode for us globally, actually, in terms of commercial opportunities, which is really exciting. And we're at that stage where we're starting to sort of, have initial growth to support that. So it's a pretty exciting time for us as we build this out.
So how do you position AppFactor against competitors like Google's Migrate for Anthos, or even AWS's App to Container in the app modernization market?
Indeed. Yeah, there's some similarities in ways to some of these products. And, we've been working on this for a long time. So we've seen these products actually emerge during that time. And obviously, Anthos Migrate was from a Velastrata acquisition, which again is another product we're familiar with. We previously built another cloud migration product. So, we're incredibly familiar with what these tools do. And we're partnered with Amazon. We've got conversations for potential partnership with Google as well. The point is those tools are good. They're helpful. But they're still challenging. They're still manual to degrees, right? They're still command line driven, or they require single app instances. They don't account for complex workloads where we have multiple components and dependencies across many hosts and systems. That's what AppFactor is designed to initially help with straight off the bat. So, and it automates that, right? What you'll find is that partners, customers, Google or Amazon themselves are having to use these tools and other products and tools to try and get that picture in terms of where we need to use the tool, right? Where are dependencies? Where do we have to take app to container? Because it doesn't provide the answers for that. It's looking at a host to host relationship only. It's not able to branch out and look at the whole infrastructure and piece these different things together. It's actually quite a complex problem to solve. And that's why we built these machine learning classifications to help us understand what critical pieces actually make up a complex workload when it's across, multiple host systems. And that's what AppFactor does.
All right. Are there any other exciting feature or developments on the horizon for AppFactor that you would like to share with us?
Sure. Well, look, I think we're still pretty early on in our journey, but clearly there's a wealth of use cases and technical requirements that we receive from our customers, be it existing and prospective. So for us, application support is one that we're seeing a huge amount of, right? Trying to support more runtimes, different use cases within the application patterns that we've detected, more target support in terms of technologies that we can move to. So it's the breadth and support levels of the product that we're really starting to see emerge. That if you keep in touch with us, you'll start to see more support emerging for those. But equally, it's the third module that you'll also see launch. That perhaps towards the end of the year, early next year is our formal launch of that particular functionality, and that really is about us accelerating and simplifying the provisioning of newer applications, right? So you've got customers that are writing code and pushing that. One of the challenges that developers have is that they're currently tasked with provisioning cloud infrastructure and services, but they don't necessarily know what they need. And that becomes, a real blocker and slows them down. So it's repurposing for us the deployment side that we're building out to allow them to automate the process of provisioning cloud infrastructure and technologies based on the application that they're and the changes that they're committing to. So that's the deploy and maintain module. That's what we'll have, coming up, and that's a major release for us. And that really supports the journey that, like I say, customers are on. That we're making applications compatible with DevOps. We're making applications compatible with things like open telemetry. We're optimizing them architecturally to take advantage of more modern cloud technologies. And part of that is being able to update them, right, and keep them current. And so supporting the developer life cycle through that journey and being able to redeploy and provision them and, provision new environments rapidly. That's the next phase for AppFactor. And that's what we'll start to see, emerge in the next coming months.
All right. So thank you so much, Keith, for joining us today and sharing some really valuable insights. Now, on the ending note, I will ask you 3 very quick questions, which will be for our younger audiences.
Right.
Okay. So what entrepreneurial advice would you like to give to our younger generation?
Okay. I would suggest it's perhaps a key word that I like to share with my children who are still very young, and that's persistence. I think if you can be persistent in life with everything that you do, that will see you through, and that will see you through failure, which you should expect. But if you're persistent and you believe in yourself, it means that you're going to keep going, right? And eventually you'll get to where you want to be. So for me, word persistence is something that everyone should really focus on. I think that's a really key thing to have in your arsenal.
Amazing. So what do you think about the content creator world of social media?
Yes, well, it's an incredibly powerful tool, right? Social media. I think there's a fine balance to strike, in my personal opinion, in terms of how much we should leverage it and use it and be exposed to it on a day-to-day basis, because it can be a bit of a distraction as well as a useful tool. So I think, in small doses, pretty helpful. It's certainly a great way of, obviously being able to market and have some thought leadership and expand on views and share opinions and views for sure. But yeah, I think in small doses is probably a good thing.
Right. And what should one think when he or she wants to quit everything in life?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. Like I said, I think persistence come back to that first point, right? There's always highs and lows in life, on a personal level and on a professional level. I think, celebrate your wins. You have to remind yourself you do need some of the challenging times to highlight the good ones. But I think there's no need to give up if you're persistent and you can keep going. I think there's always a good time around the corner, right? And you just have to focus on those moments and enjoy them. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
All right. So, Keith, before we leave, just one more question. Any thoughts,
Sure.
for platforms like MobileAppDaily?
Obviously you guys, have got some great interviews there. Trying to keep up with all the latest and greatest technologies and companies emerging. So I'd say keep it up. It's a hard, probably a challenging thing to keep up because there's, like we touched on, right? There's so much fast moving technologies and companies. So I don't envy you in that, in trying to keep up, but, you're doing a great job. So, I'd say keep it up, keep going, try and stay abreast of all these sort of fast moving evolutions that we see in both companies and technologies. And, thanks a lot for having us on here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today, and thank you so much for the interview as well. We hope
Sure.
you have a great day, Keith. Thank you.
Angie, appreciate it. See you soon. Thanks.
Okay.